Come on in, bestie. Welcome to StoryPod, where we do the doing of story development together. Brought to you by Creative BFF. Welcome back, girl. Listen, so good to see you. It feels like it's been a minute. It hasn't been a minute for you, but it feels like it's been a minute for me. I am so glad to be with you today on this episode of the podcast. Before I get started, if you would like to send me a question to answer here on the podcast, please feel free to do so. You can email me at ash@creativebff.com, or you can go to my website, creativebff.com, and shoot a cute little message in the contact section. All that information should be down below wherever you are, wherever you are watching or listening to this. And so today, we will be doing, again, one of my favorite things. Until you're asking me your story questions, I'm going to misread it, okay? Writing subreddits to find questions to answer. And so that is what we are going to be doing today. And join me as I avert my eyes to read the question to you. The question is it racist to describe a black person's skin as coffee colored by Love is Dead Mate on the r/writing questions subreddit? And they ask, I have one character in my book and I describe him as having messy jet black hair and coffee colored skin. But when I started looking at images of coffee colored skin in order to make sure I was using the right description for his skin tone, I saw a few blogs saying that it was rooted in racism, but I don't quite understand why. I'm what has been so eloquently described as wonder-bred white and admittedly uneducated on racial issues, so I'd really like to hear more opinions on the subject. The last thing I want is to come off as racist in my book. And as a full disclosure, what I will be offering will be an opinion, as is pretty much anybody's thoughts on how one would handle this, for the most part, is going to be based on opinion. Now, I'm going to do something I don't normally do, which is I'm going to read the response that was posted because I think it brings up some interesting points that I didn't know. So, Tobias Widower answered, historically, yes, the comparison to coffee has always been rooted in racist rhetoric. Examples like Colin Farrell's character Bullseye in Daredevil interacting with a racist grandma who describes someone as having a little cream in their coffee. However, the context matters as well as the depiction. The Fall of Reach by Eric Nyland is a great example where it describes Sergeant Avery Johnson as a black man, which was odd, as post-globalization, most people ended up as some varied shade of brown, paraphrased. And it serves as a great way to describe how a character's skin color sets them aside from their fellows without making it a larger point in their identity. Kind of, he's black, okay, moving on. Honestly, it does tend to just be easier to use a synonym than attempt to address the issue without killing the frog and yanking the reader out of the story. Charcoal, the sea at night, finest calligrapher's ink, dress it up however you like. So, my thoughts on this, I feel like this is probably going to be a relatively brief podcast episode, but before I get started on what I think, I would like to know what you think about this and how you would handle it, because there's probably going to be a variety of opinions on this particular subject. So let me know down below what you think. Let's be respectful and polite because we can be, and why not? So my thoughts are this. Initially, off the bat, TLDR, I don't think it's racist. It doesn't come off as racist to me to describe someone as having coffee colored skin. And I suppose I would be someone who would be described by racist grandma as having a little cream in their coffee. Okay. I am a black woman. Okay. Anyway, I'm not going to get any more into that. So to me, being within this, I was going to say society, culture, demographic is the word I was looking for. Me personally, I don't find it to be racist. Now, I know that I have had a different experience in life than someone who would have been described as having quote unquote coffee colored skin. So let me know what you think. if you are someone who has a darker skin tone and you've had different experiences in society, if you read this in a book, a character being described as having coffee colored skin, would that offend you? Would that seem racist to you? Now, as far as the part that I think may have more, maybe a little more touchy, is the description of having messy jet black hair, particularly the word messy. And that is because, within society, typically African American, black, type 4, coily, kinky, whatever, however you want to describe it, hair has been seen as being messy in its natural state. And so there is a history of feeling like if you have that texture of hair, which I have, I don't know if you can tell, that you would have to tame it. You need to press it, which means to straighten it. You would need to use relaxers on it, wear wigs, things like that. And there has been a little bit of a movement. I don't know if it's still as strong as it was, some years ago, 5-10 years ago. I don't know if it's still going strong, but there was a movement to sort of reclaim some of the pride and appreciation of our hair texture. So using the word messy may be a little bit touchy. Now, with that being said, it is possible for someone who has, traditionally African textured hair, type 4, whatever you want to call it, to have hair that is in a messy style. So as long as it's not describing the natural state of the hair as being inherently messy, just because that's how, how it grows out of the head. If you're not going that far, then okay. It can be like they had a bun, their hair was in a bun that had been left in for 3 days, and they've been having all kinds of craziness happen. It's wind blown. It's, all over the place from, whatever action that they've been involved in, whatever the case may be. So perhaps their hair is objectively, quote unquote, messy because it is no longer contained within the style that it was originally, put in or whatever. But perhaps using other words besides messy, windblown obviously being one of them, pieces, describing it as pieces of it were coming out of the ponytail, that whatever the case may be. That I think probably, I feel like, might be more touchy, may be perceived as more quote unquote racist than describing the skin tone as coffee colored. Now, on another point of that, do I think that the term describing a skin tone as coffee colored is the best way to do it? I think it's a little bit expected, cliche, boring, overdone maybe, but I wouldn't put it as something offensive and racist to me. You may feel differently, and you're entitled to feel that way, and let me know down below why, because there may be a piece of history that I'm also missing. Maybe that the answer from Tobias Widower didn't encapsulate the full history of skin tone being described as coffee colored. And here's another question. Would it be racist? Would it be deemed as racist to describe anybody else's skin tone through a food item, or like Wonder Bread? Does that feel racist? Equally racist? I feel like within the logic of your world that you have created, see if you can find another more world or story specific way to describe someone's skin tone if necessary. Or you could just use like deep skin tone. But in terms of what would be some examples of more world specific? I mean, if we're in maybe like a fantasy setting, perhaps you can bring in kind of more nature references, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is even as, listen, I'm gonna give some examples, maybe one or two if I can think of any, and maybe these seem equally racist, so you let me know. But perhaps you can pull in the deep color of earth and soil. Especially, it might be nice if that character has a connection to the earth, nature. If that's kind of like their vibe, that could be a very nice comparison, which drives home that aspect of their personality, of their characterization. If it's like a horror thing, maybe they could be like the color of grave soil, if that's like, so, I mean, is that scary? I don't know. I don't really read horror because I have a very active imagination, and I will play myself when I'm trying to go to sleep at night in the darkness, and I'll start seeing moving shapes, and I don't want to do that. So I kind of try to stay away from the horror for my own well-being, but maybe that's, something. So I would say, try to find some descriptions that maybe are not food related in general. Somebody with like a medium tan skin tone probably would be described as caramel. How do you say it? Olive tone, which I think olive tone skin is sort of unique in that it's kind of pulled out of, I think when you describe someone's skin as olive toned, olive skin, it doesn't necessarily sound like the food reference, like an actual olive. It's more of a color tone. What about taupe? What color is taupe? Is that kind of like when I say the word taupe, I feel like it's like a deep brown with grayish, pinkish undertones. I have no idea. I'll probably look it up after this podcast is over and watch it be something like a green, you know what I'm saying? But that, I think, is the extent of my thoughts on this. I feel like the TLDR is that it's, to me, doesn't smack as racist. It doesn't sound racist to me to describe someone as having coffee colored skin. Chocolate colored skin, people might feel some kind of way about. And I only say that because in my family, we have a variety of skin tones. And one of my aunts, who is a deeper skin tone, darker skin tone, she has a slight, at least my impression when she described it to me, is she has a slight dislike for being described as having like chocolate colored skin. However, she's also described her daughter as a chocolate drop, which I think is adorable. I think it's adorable, and they're beautiful, and the skin tone is beautiful. So I don't know. Maybe just stay away from food references. Maybe just to be safe, stay away from food references in terms of skin tone, especially in today's, political climate. Then you'll be safe. Just say it's deep and move on. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, I think that's pretty much the extent of my thoughts. Oh, I was also going to say, in this TLDR section, try to find another way of describing skin tone, because not chocolate, but coffee colored feels kind of played out. To me, it may not be to your readers or to yourself. But anyway, so that's the extent. I keep saying that's like the third time that I've said this is the extent of my thoughts on this subject, but let me know what you think. I'm very interested in it. And by way of some final thoughts, will I finish this sentence? We will find out. By way of some final thoughts, I think that it's very commendable to not want to come off as racist or to be offensive to anybody in your book, and that's wonderful. But I do also think we can run the risk of being pulled in too many directions by people's opinions, because at the end of the day, you can't please everyone, I think. And, I guess we would have to read it in context in your book using the term coffee colored, but just off the top of the dome, just out of context, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me, but, let me know what you think. Gentle listener and watcher. So anyway, Listen, it has been wonderful to be here with you for this relatively brief, as far as I am concerned, because as we already know, your girl likes to talk, this relatively brief podcast episode. If you have any thoughts that, let's have a discussion, let's have a conversation about this. And then perhaps if there is an actual conversation that's going on, we can revisit this. And if I'm wrong, I have no problem with admitting when I'm wrong, and I would love to hear your points of view on the subject. Until then, friend, I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Love you, girl. Come on. Love you.